I'm in Max.
You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast.
I'm in Max.
Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello. Listen to the air conditioner. It's running. It's really loud right now. Thank you for joining us for Season 28, Episode 17 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
I'm Stork. It's just us.
It's just us. It's just us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And in this episode, I forgot to write down what's supposed to be in this episode. In this episode, Nicholas sends us an email about charisma or appearance or whatever you want to call it. And we might read a second email, also from Nicholas, which is a question about rules, if we get to that one. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. And if you want to watch us live, we're on at Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. At some point, we're going to switch back to Fridays, but I don't know when. I haven't decided yet.
I kind of like Saturdays.
It's working
a little less
out.
Stressful.
It won't work out when fair comes, obviously.
Right.
But
nothing works out when fair comes.
no,
Our
he
whole
just
lives
kind
are disrupted for a
just
couple
disappear
of months.
for 2 months.
Yeah.
But before we start that, I have a new sort of initiative role question, which is, I'm interested in GMing someday. Where should I start? Sort of like a less urgent version of the last one, which is like that last minute advice you'd give someone when they're going to GM for the first time. But I'm new to role playing games. I think I might be interested in GM. What's my first step into becoming a GM? Or what's your advice to someone becoming a good GM?
It's funny because my daughter has been. She's self-nerding. She nerded herself, maybe because her dad casts a long, nerdy shadow. But she's gotten into role-playing games. She got into it in college. Started out with Magic.
Right.
That lasted like a minute and then moved into D&D and some other things. And she had some bad experiences. But she's beginning to decide she wants to GM. Now, the world's a little different than it was when we were young, when we were kids, because the whole internet thing.
Yes.
But I still contend that role-playing games work best when everybody gathers together in a room and plays. You can do it online, but I still contend that that's the best way to go. And I think the best way to start out GMing, other than all the drama about learning rules and all that stuff, is call up some of your friends who are either RPG curious or people that you know are role players, and throw a little party, just like Stu does, and start with a one-shot. Or start with just a simple sort of character gen and a small story arc that lasts like 2 or 3 weekends. That's the best way, because you get everybody together, everybody's in on it. You're basically throwing a little party. You get some drinks, some cheese, some wine, and some beer, and you play a game. You can do it online, but it's really abstracted, and then you got to reach out, you got to find people, and people feel more compelled to flake because it's not real. Yeah. I still say go old school and, gather 4 of your friends together and have a little party one evening or, Friday night.
I like that. I was thinking, if you want to GM for the first time, go out and figure out which system. I'm assuming you've played, which system you've enjoyed playing the most, and invest in that system.
Yep.
And just start reading through it.
Yep.
And because when you're a player, especially if it's a system that you don't play regularly, like if ever you get a table that plays D&D and been playing D&D for years, everyone probably knows the rules pretty well. But if you're coming at it from the sort of gamers that we are, where you play a bunch of different stuff, a lot of players have no real familiarity with the rules apart from what they have to do with their particular
Absolutely.
character.
There's
right?
a lot of stuff that happens under the hood that the GM has to deal with. It's abstracted. The players don't really know. They just roll dice and look at the GM expectantly.
Right. Or they might know what their target numbers are or whatever, but sometimes they don't. Right. So my suggestion is find that system that you like, that you've enjoyed playing, get the rule book and see what happens, under the hood that makes the thing work. I mean, I always, whenever I'm reading a new system, first thing I do is I make a bunch of characters.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 characters. After that, I have those characters fight each other.
And that is a really good way to learn a system, because suddenly you find yourself, you have to do that because you find yourself going, wait a minute, how does how does piercing damage work? And now all of a sudden, you instead of taking time at the table, you're
Right.
going through and looking for the obscure page with the little sentence on it that talks about how arrows, damage decreases every 10 feet.
Right.
And you never would have found that out until your ranger took a shot on the game, and now you're spending. So yeah, that's invaluable, and it's free. It's kind of fun. You're sort of on your own, just rolling up characters and having them fight.
It's to me, that's a good way to approach any new system. But if you're going to start out, I want to be a GM someday. Invest in a game book, because a lot of players don't. They don't have to. They have a character sheet, and that's pretty much all the information they need. Just a well-designed character sheet might have all of the information you need. So
I even knew GMs back in the day that didn't want their players having a monster manual.
Oh yeah, I can see that,
because they didn't want they wanted to describe the monster, and they didn't want the people to go, oh, it's a troll, so we got to use fire, because it would help reduce metagaming, and even just the wonder of the game. It's like if GM describes a creature and you don't know what it is, it's terrifying. It adds a bit of like, what is that thing? What do we do?
Oh,
which is what you would be doing,
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the I'm starting the prep for the GURPS fantasy game, and that's one thing that 4th edition GURPS does not have is they called it a bestiary, but it's a book of things to fight, because GURPS is basically kind of a construction set.
Yes,
It's not just a generic game system. It's also sort of a world building system, kind of, depending on how you make the character.
A lot of little parts.
Yes. So I went through and tried to find to see, because in the 2nd or 3rd edition there was a bestiary, and then they had all your typical shit in it: dragons and
Trolls and orcs.
werewolves, all kinds of were creatures, and just a typical fodder, orcs, and all kinds of stuff that you could murder and take its stuff. But for 4th edition, they never made that. But I did find something online that had that kind of stuff, some of that kind of stuff. But the nice thing is, it's like I went and founded a monster, like a typical. I want no spoilers. A typical archetypal monster for fantasy games, and I took it and I'm like, okay, now I'm going to tweak it, make it different. So it's not going to be exactly what you suspect it's going to be. It's going to be slightly different, and maybe that'll make it a little more terrifying.
You should reach out to the Mook. You could probably just info dump an entire monster manual on you of stuff he's created and has access to.
Yes, someone created this enormous wiki of stats for monsters in GURPS.
I bet it was Mook.
No, it wasn't. No. I don't know who made the thing, but it's also user contributable. So you've got GURPS GMs from all over who are uploading their monsters to it, and
that's great.
Fucking vast.
So that's one of the cool things about gaming in this day and age, is that kind of resource.
Oh yeah.
And as a starting GM too, that's cool for you, but could also be very overwhelming. Again, I say start small. Start with a small party, start with low-level characters, depending on whatever system you're doing, and start with a small group. But all that stuff is accessible to you, and it can easily get overwhelming. I get caught up in the world building, and I found myself figuring out rules for how far a horse would travel, and then you have to hobble the horse at night so it doesn't run away. And I'm like, wait a minute, whoa. I'm getting way too caught in the minutia. You get lost in the weeds sometimes in your world building, which is because that's the fun part as a GM, because that's what you get to do. You get to build this sandbox, and that's the fun thing that, all right, I get to throw all these things in here, yay! And then the players come in and fuck it all up. So that's another thing I guess to be aware of when you are starting out, is keeping it simple and keeping it, because as much as you want to have fun, if you overcomplicate your world and you overcomplicate your game from the start, you're gonna make your life difficult.
I didn't say jerps. I said GURPS. I've never called it jerps. I have a feeling I know who that might be. I think that's someone who used to refer to gibbering mouthers. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah. Gibbering gamers.
Right. RPGM Sean says, making characters fight each other to test out a system is an upgraded version of playing with our action toys. It is. It's
feeling attacked.
It's having your G.I. Joes fight.
Yeah.
It's having your G.I. Joes fight each other.
You know you're a GM if you actually made stats for each G.I. Joe before they fought.
Right. I remember there was a really fun game. I can't remember the name of it. It was a individual level combat game, so like just like a melee combat level game, and it was all. You had these flip books, Lost Worlds, I think it was called.
I think there was an RPG called that. Yeah.
It wasn't an RPG. It was just combat, but it was sort of like you remember Ace of Aces, which was the World War I.
Yes.
Dogfighting game where like here's the German book, and
yes,
it shows you what your character's seeing.
Yeah. Wow.
This was like that, but it was combat. So like if I'm playing like I don't know.
A French military.
Well, no, it was all old, but it was like I'm playing like a Roman legionnaire, and you're playing like I don't know,
like Held,
something else.
Yeah.
And you hand each other your books, and you've got your stats, and then you go through, and depending on what maneuver they do and what maneuver you do, then you flip to the right page, and it shows you what happened and if anyone took any damage. It was really cool. I don't know why I just thought of that, but it just randomly popped into my head.
It's like a choose your own adventure, but it's a choose your own strategy.
Yeah, it's like you pick which maneuver you're going to make, and the other person picks the maneuver they're going to make, and then you
on the list. There's like go to page 42.
Exactly. There's like a way. I think they're on the bottom. Like if they pick this, you pick this, and then you go to this page. God knows who it was who came up with the way to organize that book in that way so it would work.
They should give lessons to current RPG.
Holy fuck!
I was looking through Vampire the other day to find just a simple thing like XP chart and I couldn't. It's not listed anywhere.
It's in there.
But you gotta look for it. I mean, the first 100 pages is just like handwritten notes that are all scattered. You're like, I don't need any of this.
It's all fluff.
I'm trying to find the chart. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like all the files, like the Second Inquisition files.
Get it. You're in love with your world, and it's awesome, and it is nice to have in there. But for fuck's sake, when you're giving out a resource book, it needs to be just clear. Like a page of like all the useful charts that you need that you can turn to.
I would like two versions of the core rulebook. Mm-hmm. The regular version with all their fluff and all their art and fartsy shit, and then I want a technical document.
I agree.
I want no art, charts if you have to have charts. Yes, it's nice to have, and then and organize it by like rule type or whatever, so you can say, okay, so you have like a table of contents. You don't need to look through you have a table of contents. So I'm looking for this rule, and and organize it like a technical document would be organized. So you could just go through and find, okay, this is the rule, and then
don't be afraid to repeat the same information in multiple places. Like when you have character gen, it's okay to have the experience table there. It's also okay to have the experience table later on under experience. It's also okay to have the experience table at the end, like with a bunch of charts. It's okay to have it multiple times. Don't just hide one small table in the middle of the book somewhere once.
Right. If you got important tables, those go on the inside of the covers. Right?
It should be in multiple places. I don't even mind if it's like in the middle of the book, is maybe it's in red. So you open up, you see the red edges of the book. There are all your tables, whatever it is. But
they're mentioning the fact that Cortex Prime is kind of a cluster when it comes to organization. You're right, because I just got a copy of that a couple weeks ago because Jim mentioned it when we had a barbecue, and I'm like, I want to look at this. So I ordered it, and Kimmy, of course, it was immediately like, oh my God, you're just starting a new campaign. Don't buy a new game book.
She's such a mom.
Like, don't worry about it.
It's for research purposes only.
And it's nice. Like the beginning part of it is real good when it like gives you the sort of the basics of how the mechanics work. But then it's kind of like a RPG system construction set. So it starts out with a basic, very basic mechanic, and then there's a bunch of add-ons you can do later on to make it, more of what you want.
All I know is that I haven't run into an RPG yet that's very well organized. GURPS isn't too bad because it's so many small pieces. They know that, and they organize it in various places. But Vampire's a nightmare, no pun intended, to navigate your way through. Legend of the Five Rings has the same problem Vampire does. Is they're so in love with their world and so in love with their fluff. You have to
sift through a bunch of crap
and sometimes
to get
it's
to the
even
rules.
On the same page. Sometimes there's like an entire paragraph, of some poem next to your experience tables, and it's like you're taking up valuable real estate, and I have to all of them. Okay, even early D&D, is still kind of a nightmare to organize. The later editions, I remember
It's gotten way better.
Third was pretty good because you could at least open up the back and everything was there, and you could find what page you needed the stuff on. But it really bothers me that this ties in with GMing. As a GM, knowing where to find the thing that you need shouldn't take a lot of work. It should just be really, let's look that up. Oh, here it is. Why is that so hard?
Right. RPG Sean says that one thing he really likes about the GURPS books is the cross-referencing in the text. It's like a paper version of a wiki, and it is. And the nice thing is, the other books are too.
Yeah.
So it'll tell you, like if you're in, like let's say the horror book, and there's like, and the person needs to make a fright check. Fright checks are in basic rule, page number, blah blah blah. They do that all the time.
Okay, at least that's better than please see chapter that associated with fear checks.
Right? No, in GURPS they actually will give you like, because B means basic set, so it's one of the two books, and the two books the page numbers are consecutive, so it starts on page 1, and then by the time you get to the second book you're on page 328, and then the numbers keep going, so they consider that one volume, and it's just, and then it, like if it says M 312, well, they don't have the 312 pages in Magic book, but let's say M126, you go to Magic page 126, and that gives you whatever spell, or the organization for that book is superior.
Any game companies out there, if you guys want to, not necessarily money grab, but one more thing to add to give you money is to make a GM only book full of the charts and pertinent information, and so it's like a really, really glorified thick GM screen. You can even include graphics for GM screen that people can print up on their own. But have all the stuff that the GM needs easily organized so that they don't have to go through all the fluff to find the rule that they need. You can even do it for players, too. Just stuff that they need. Because it is so frustrating to buy the big $60 book and spend 20 minutes looking for one rule. It stops your game. It stops the fun. And as much as the fluff is interesting to read once, that's it. You're done with it. Once you read all that fluff, now you got to sift through it. It's so frustrating.
It is.
So I don't know, maybe players should make websites that just deconstruct and find all the rules and bring them up there. And
see, I think if you started out with your basic rules in like a system reference document, because they have that for Pathfinder, it's like that, and that's like, here's where all the rules are going to be. If we change a rule, we'll go on this web page or whatever and modify it. So this is the thing you look at if there's errata or something like that. And just put all of the rules in one place. Please. Without all the rest of the shit. I would love that.
And even just keep the graphics simple. Because the other thing sometimes is you'll come upon a really fancy book, and the printing is really small, or it's in some flowery font, and you're like, or
it's on a really busy background, so it's hard to read.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a GM. I don't need my hit point, or my attack table in runic cuneiform. I just want to be able to read it.
The New World of Darkness Mage book is almost unreadable.
It's almost exactly. I didn't want to call them out.
It's like gold. Some of it is like gold print on like a parchment background. It's like, yes, you could make it harder to read. It is possible that you could have made it harder to read.
And who's that
You
for?
could have like a red page with red ink.
Well, who are you doing that for? At that point, it's masturbation for you. Because the GM is just going to get pissed off. Like the first time, this is really cool, as you're reading through it. After the fifth time, you're looking up the word, like, this is pissing me off. You're only doing it for you, the publisher, because you think it's fun and fancy. You're not doing it to be clear for the GMs and the players.
Right.
It's just masturbation at your point, on your point. Well, we're going to use up money from our Kickstarter. Let's make it all gold ink. Don't! You're not helping anybody.
I probably picked gold ink because it was cheaper. They got a deal on it. Do you want to read the email from Nicholas?
Sure. Anyway, I don't know if we answered your question.
There was no question.
Get a party and invite your friends.
There was no question.
There you go.
Go.
Oh boy. Yeah. Okay. Holla. Yeah. Nicholas.
Hala ala harfagrar.
Yeah, but the R would be silent. It's Norwegian, I think.
There's R's are silent in Norwegian?
Yeah.
Are they? Oh.
Sometimes.
Hala ala hafaga is.
Sorry, Nicholas. You're going to have to put translation there even.
I think it has a little circle over the A.
Yeah. What do they call it? Umlaut?
No, umlaut's two little dots.
There's a schwa? Anyway.
I don't know. It's a little circle.
Let's talk about being good RPGers. I'll start again. Let's talk about being good looking. RPGs are all about play pretend, and that's in quotes. Many want to play the main character of a Hollywood movie. Perfect teeth and a square jaw. This is seriously a huge problem for some reason. To shatter this belief, some games make beauty into a trait. They cost XP to have the privilege of being good looking. That's a really good way to put it. Another common way to gamify the hot or not score is to make it directly correlate to charisma. This is the actual benefit of messing with min-maxers who dump static charisma, much to their chagrin. What? It means something? Far less popular is to make beauty a balanced aspect of a character, to add some negatives to all the positive. Maybe a beautiful face stands out more in a crowd, or at least is more memorable when the police are questioning witnesses. Maybe it's harder to keep a low profile at a bar when the waitress keeps returning with refills while asking if there is anything more she could do for you. Wink, wink. I added that. Love to hear what you beautiful bastards have to say. If you aren't experts on the topic, I don't know who are. Aw, you had me at hello.
You're lying.
Beautiful bastards.
I've always liked the way GURPS does this thing. There is a charisma advantage you can take. Your stats don't have anything to do with what they did. Intelligence, dex, health, and strength. Those are your stats in the game. There's no really social aspect to it whatsoever. So you can purchase with character points levels of attractiveness, which give you, in certain circumstances, will give you benefits, but can also be a negative under certain. Like he mentions the fact that, if you take 4 or 5 levels of attractiveness, you probably don't have a forgettable face, and that could be, and that's also going to sort of change what sort of character you might make.
But it could be the opposite is also true. If you're so horribly disfigured, you're not forgettable either.
That's true. Well, I think anytime you get, because you can buy attractive or unattractive.
Yeah.
Unattractive is a disadvantage. You get points for every level you take. And so, I think anything away from sort of the center of the bell curve for that sort of thing is going to get memorable.
What's funny is that they should both have the same advantage, because being disfigured could be an advantage. You want to intimidate the pawnbroker, you show up with your scarred up face and and they're like, okay, I don't want to fuck with this dude. They don't have to know that you were mauled by a cat when you were a kid, and you're actually a nice guy. But your physical looks can affect both adversely. If you're really good looking or have an innocent baby face, that pawnbroker's going to want to take advantage of you. No matter, if you look like Bernadette Peters or something, they're going to, oh, you little child, you don't know any better. It could be a complete and total disadvantage to be attractive.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah, no, under certain circumstances, yes. But there are also, the way it works in GURPS is you have what's called a reaction roll. When someone meets you for the first time, you roll 3d6, and that basically sort of helps determine what this person thinks about you, generally speaking, and you get pluses or minuses depending on the advantages or disadvantages that you took.
Right.
On that roll.
I'm shocked that there's a mechanical advantage attached to a trait in GURPS.
Well,
shocked, I tell you.
Well, it's not really a trait, because it's not. It's. That's the other thing, is it's split up into a bunch of different things. There's attractive and unattractive, but there's also charisma, which is a personality trait. It's not a physical trait.
Let me stop you right there and sort of maybe give you a quick definition of charisma for me. And this has taken me a while to figure out, but working in Hollywood, you run into these people, these stars, right? And they're stars, but even when they're not on camera and they're just hanging out, there's this thing about them. And I call it charisma because there's no, and Timothy Spall is a great example. Timothy Spall is a character actor. He's been in Sweeney Todd. He played the ratty guy in Harry Potter, and he's a very ugly, weird-looking dude. And yet, you can't take your eyes off him whenever he's on camera. It's his mannerisms, it's the way he goes, it's the way he carries himself. And we've all run into people like that just you can't tell you what it is. They're not even particularly attractive. They just have this charisma, this thing, this Hollywood. They call it
je ne sais quoi.
They call it the it factor. It's like they just have it. And that's charisma to me. It's that vibe. I don't know. I don't want to get too woo-woo about it, but we all know those people that they just, like, they walk into a door and all eyes turn to them. And it's like this, what is it about them? What is it? Well, it's this weird
And it's
charisma.
not attractiveness. It's not, because there are people who no one would consider physically attractive who still have this sort of
aura, you know?
Je ne sais quoi.
I know. It's really woo-woo, but if you really think about it, we all have a friend that's that guy or person or woman. And sometimes they're attractive, but yeah, sometimes they're just average looking, but for some reason, everybody gravitates around them. It's a weird thing. And a lot of them end up being entertainers because, they just can't help.
A lot of them also end up becoming outside salespeople.
Well, yeah. There's that too. Or lawyers.
Some of the most successful salespeople are these people who will come in and they can sort of, and it's not just them. I think there's some like learned skills involved in it too, because they know how to sort of insert themselves in a conversation, like without you even noticing that they've inserted themselves in the conversation. They do it so effortlessly, it doesn't seem like an intrusion. Like if I'm sitting in, for the shop and I'm talking to someone, we're having a conversation about something, the sales rep walks in, half the time they're like, "Oh, what you guys talking about?" And it's like, you just ruin the vibe. And then someone else will walk in and listen for a couple minutes, and then all of a sudden they'll like sort of very effortlessly insert. And I don't know how it is that some people can do that and some people can't.
And there's another aspect of this. I don't want to talk about myself about it, but I kind of have a little bit of that, and it's what I used to call the weirdo magnet. If I go to a party and there's a sociopath at the party, I don't know how, but they end up talking to me. They're there. Hey, and I'm like, and I have to get away from them. Stu is able to Stu is a very charismatic guy, and yet he can turn it off and disappear, and I'm stuck talking to the dude for the rest of the day.
I think that's
they
because
get attracted to me.
I think that's because you're the same height as the width of the blue tarp they have in their trunk.
But again, we all know that guy too. He's like, it's the weirdo magnet. They walk into a party or they walk into a room, and everybody like, I want to talk to them.
Right.
And I can't tell you what it is they do. Anyway, so charisma is that vibe, that thing.
And I think weirdness magnet is actually a GURPS disadvantage.
A weirdo magnet? Okay.
I think it's
I
called
love that.
weirdness magnet. but I mean, there's a lot of aspects to what makes a charismatic / attractive person. And like in D&D, the stat charisma doesn't have to be attractiveness.
No.
It could be this sort of, indefinable thing that some people have that other people don't.
It's an amalgamation of charm, body build, because there is no stat for like how ripped your abs are. There's nothing for that. So charisma is like this amalgam of all of that in D&D.
Or in some cases none. You could make a very charismatic character who is ugly.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of character actors are ugly people. John Goodman is not necessarily an attractive dude. He's a big, loud, and he works all the time, and yet he's got that charisma. You can't, whenever John Goodman's on the screen,
oh yeah,
he's like the best thing you've ever seen. And he looks like everybody's uncle.
even when he's playing sociopath in
Barton Fink.
Well, I was thinking of The Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
Market Zero.
You're out of your league.
Donnie, shut the fuck up. You're out of your league. So, I know
So anyway, yeah, it's an undefinable.
It is.
And with GURPS, because it's all you can break it down. Here's the thing, though. If you're talking about just being good looking, really, that's more of like a trapping, because you might have. I'm going to pick on Adam for a minute. All of Adam's characters have really great abs, right? But that's not necessarily ever really seen, especially if you're wearing a lot of armor or robes or whatever,
right.
And it's really more of just like to make you happy that your abs are great,
right?
And you can have great abs and still not be a really attractive person.
Sure,
you could be a garbage person and that radiates from you and still have great abs.
Right.
Jeffrey Dahmer probably had great abs. Although, here's the interesting thing about serial killers like that. Jeffrey Dahmer was apparently a very charismatic, even cult leaders are very charismatic people, and yet they're scary as fuck. You know, even con men have great charisma.
Oh, yeah.
And they're not nice people. Sometimes they're even really good looking. It's kind of a prerequisite.
There was the other one that traveled around a lot. I'm talking about the serial killer.
Yeah.
You know who I'm thinking of?
The Green River Killer?
No, this is a real famous name, and he was in Florida, but he went all over the place. Oh, God damn it! I can't remember his name.
Macy.
No, he went. Macy was all in New York, wasn't it?
I don't remember.
God, I can't remember his name.
It doesn't matter. A lot of those serial killers are very charismatic dudes.
Yes.
They're able to charm their way into your confidence, and then you end up in a body bag or buried under a house somewhere. And I don't like to make light of it, but it is again. It's an interesting aspect of what it is that allows people to.
Ted Bundy.
Okay, yes, Bundy. See, I get Bundy and Dahmer kind of mixed up. They're kind of like, even in my mind, they kind of look the same.
Okay. Bundy and who?
Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, that looks very different. Dahmer was going to get 8 people.
Yes.
Okay. Ted Bundy, I think, just killed them.
Yeah, but in my mind, I get them mixed up. I know that there's a difference, and I know what they did. I just, in my mind, they kind of look the same to me. I think I learned about them around the same time. I know they're not the same, but I may cross the streams a couple of times when it comes to their various crimes. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm sure this is taking a very dark turn, but I use it to illustrate the point that charisma and looking good isn't necessarily a good thing, and it can. I don't know what that means.
Well, you know, the other aspect of charisma, and I think, is like when you've identified someone as a bullshit artist. Do you know what I'm talking about? And there are people who almost rely too heavily on this sort of natural ability to get people to like them, and they kind of know it. Then they start exuding almost like too much confidence.
Get a little smarmy, get a little slimy. Again, con men, that's their whole thing, is charisma. Con is short for confidence, man. I mean, that's the whole thing. They want to get your confidence, and so they do and say and look the part to do whatever you want. And history's full of people that have built millionaires out of money, or women into relationships, or it's awful. So a prerequisite to be a con man would be a really high charisma, because you're able to charm anybody.
Absolutely. You either need that, or you have to have a skill set that can replace that, I would think. So, okay. Thank you, Nicholas, for the email.
Yeah, and I don't know. I always treat appearance as just a trapping. It's just, that's what you look like. You can be good looking, you can be horribly disfigured, and then, again, it depends on the game system. If there's a mechanical advantage attached to it, that needs to be defined, because and it can get weird. Just to belabor the point just a little bit more, it can get weird. You have to have the same set of rules for everything. If you have a bard in your group and maybe a sorcerer, and they're charisma based, and they actually have to make rolls to affect the way people see them, then you need to make the other characters make those rolls too. You can't just have your barbarian come in and be able to talk his way out of a fight while you're making your bard and your sorcerer roll, because they actually they have powers attached to that stat.
Oh yeah.
And charisma is often often dismissed or hand waved if there's no mechanical advantage to it. It's just like, what's your charisma? Oh yeah. You can talk to the barmaid. Oh, you're a sorcerer? Make a charisma roll for me.
A sorcerer might be charisma based.
So some sorcerers are. I'm just saying that it bothers me that if you make a class that is charisma based, that the rest of the party isn't rolling charisma checks, but you are. You need to make everybody make the same charisma checks to do a similar thing that you're doing. I get it. A sorcerer casting a spell based in charisma is one thing, but to just, I don't know. I see that there's a double standard when it comes to charisma in parties. That's it.
Okay. Should we do the other the other email? I'll read the other one. Okay, it's quick. We made the switch, and 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy RPG is wonderful. My friend and notorious min-maxer soon realized it was far less deadly than earlier versions. Thus began his quest to make an unkillable character. GM, being no stranger to homebrewing, soon had tweaked the rules, making this taunting shield bearer completely useless in combat. Drama ensued. Question: thoughts on tweaking rules as you go? Does there need to be a discussion? And surely the GM has the final say. I disagree with those.
We've talked about this before, and even though the game seems imperfect to you, a lot of these rules have been road tested and are there for a reason. And you start fucking with one, it affects other things. Or you start ignoring one or taking liberties with one, it will affect the way other things work throughout the game, the world system. Again, take charisma, for example. If you start ignoring the charisma checks, suddenly the person with charisma-based powers doesn't, I spent points on this, and you guys are just hand-waving everything, god damn it.
Right.
That only because it's in my mind. You need to honor these rules, and if you're going to change them, you need to look very, very carefully about how it works in that game system and what else. It's a dominoes. You knock one down, and something else down the line doesn't work.
Right. We had, when we were playing 4th edition D&D, none of that was AP'd. We did... I was talking with Tappy about changing, because combat was taking fucking forever. And we wanted to come up with some sort of house rule that would allow us to, just shorten combat without necessarily killing a bunch of characters. And I think what we came up with, and we never implemented it, was, if your character, and I don't remember if we had a similar system for monsters. I think we did, but the idea was that if you take an amount of points equal to your constitution, you're knocked out by one attack. And we had a conversation outside after we played the session. After the session was over, I asked everyone about what do you guys think about doing this, and someone was playing a character who was I don't remember what they were playing, but they had a particular feat, and it said that, and the way we had set it up, it said this feat basically now becomes useless for some reason. I don't remember exactly what the feat was and how it interacted with that, but it basically would have negated the fact that it existed. And the player had kind of built his character around this concept within the construct of the rules the way they were written. So we ended up not doing it. And that's one of the problems, is there's going to be unintended consequences to any rule change you make. I have another problem with this email, not you and your email, but the fact that you've got a table where you've got a notorious min-maxer who wants to make the unkillable character, and then you've got the GM who's going to change the rules to foil that character. This is like World War II when the Nazis are fighting Stalin. It's you're going to root for one side or the other, but you still feel dirty. Because there's no real... I don't see any heroes in this situation. And I don't mean to,
If your min-maxer's doing one thing and then your GM is countering, you're still at ground zero again. I mean, you're still at where you were. You
it's
just
a fight.
Fucked up all the rules. Go back to where you were.
It's like a passive-aggressive fight between these two people who probably shouldn't be in the same gaming group to begin with.
And you're not accomplishing anything. So, he elevates and then you counter, and he elevates and you counter, and you're still at an impact. You're still at where you were. You just have elevated and broken a bunch of rules for everybody else. I get it. That's what min-maxers like to do, right? And certain game systems encourage that. I mean, I certainly discovered that with 4E, that if you don't optimize your character and you don't take all the right
feats,
your
character wrong.
You made your character wrong. It can get awful. And then I also feel for the GM. We took 8 hours to do one combat once or something. And it wasn't 8. It was 4 hours or something to do a combat in one game. And at some point,
it was more like 6.
At some point,
it was a long time.
You throw up your hands exasperated, going, "There's got to be a way to fix this."
Right.
It isn't necessarily broken. It's just not good. That's the way the rules are written. They're there for a reason. It's hard, and there are some workarounds and stuff and tweaks, but you have to be very careful and very clear about why you're doing it. Somebody.
Well, it was. I think it's Kimmy says it was 8, 8 hours.
It was, wasn't it?
And it was, and that's when I sort of took a deep dive into the game mechanics.
Right.
In 4th edition, I'm like, how can I make like a really challenging, really frustrating combat for the players? And I basically had you fight all controllers.
Yeah.
And I figured this way I can separate. Again, they're going to go after the healer, and they're going to take the healer someplace where it's going to be a large enough map where they can get the healer someplace where they won't be able to get to him, and they won't be able to help each other. And it was horrific. It was a horrific fight. I mean, it was the most challenging fight you guys ever had.
That was the exploding skeletons, right?
No, it was the guys that would grab onto you and drag you away. It was the one
one.
where your guy went down the wrong.
That was the exploding skeleton one.
That wasn't Exploding Skeletons.
Okay.
Exploding Skeletons was a different one. That one was also amazing. But it wasn't just because, now she's saying it's just because one person went down a hallway. That's not why. The fight would have been horrific anyway. It would have been, it may not have taken 8 hours.
I know, it's just funny to pick on me.
It actually may have taken longer. Because of the fact because you going down the hallway got all of them involved at once rather than one doing them one at a time, which might have actually taken longer. And you did ultimately win.
Yes.
But
Nobody wiped out there. The exploding skeletons, just for summary, the exploding skeletons, Stu picked a monster, sounded really cool, but it turns out that when they explode, they do damage, they do like an area effect damage, and if the skeletons are all standing next to each other...
And they were.
They start taking damage. So basically he had a chain reaction of like 10 skeletons explode after one guy hit them.
I think it was only for like 4.
It was like Casey hit one.
He hit
they
and
all
killed
went
one.
up
and
killed him.
And he
got
ended
shrapnel.
up... Yeah, he ended up taking enough damage to kill his character.
Yeah, they had like bone shrapnel, just like oh yeah, it's like boom, 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 boom,
I don't remember what they were called, but they were actually like lifted right out of the monster.
Yeah.
Or one of the, because that book had like that game had like 3 monsters.
And it might even have been Casey that goes, Are they all close enough? Are they taking damage? And your eyes lit up and went, yes, they are. And the next thing I know, Stu's rolling and all the skeletons are exploding one after the other. And Casey's just he took like 20 dice of damage or something ridiculous.
It was sick.
It was, and we were all like, well, after that it was easy because they were gone. Casey died. Anyway.
But I mean, that email indicates to me that there's a problem, a group problem.
Yeah.
Because if you've got a min-maxer, that I mean, people play role-playing games for different reasons, and they want to scratch different itches. And this guy's got the rules itch, and he was like, I want to see if I can exploit the rules and find the loopholes in the rules, and see if I can create, like a super powerful character, because it's
there is a I get that, it's kind of fun,
right? I mean, on a metagame level, it's something that people do.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily find that fun, but there are people that like want to find rules exploits.
Sure.
There's that. But then there's also the guy's got an empowerment fantasy, wants to make a character that's not killable, right? And that's not the same. Those are two different things. And one, I mean, you could make a character where the character's like, I want to become unkillable. That's cool. I get that concept, right? Especially if you're in a crazy ass game like Warhammer, and where you could totally end up doing something like that. And that kind of player has his place, or her place, or their place in a game, in some game somewhere. But now you have a GM who's like, I'm going to change the rules so that you can't do what you're trying to do. Even though I know this is what you're trying to do, and I know that this is part of your fun, I'm going to abuse my GM fiat to change the rules on the fly. And like his question, like, thoughts on tweaking the rules as you go? Yes, you can do that. You got to have 100% buy-in from your players. If you don't have 100% buy-in, then making that change is a bad idea. Now, if you find a rules like a real exploit, like you find something where it's like the win button, like they're like you figure out there's a combination of things that they didn't find in playtesting that it's like, oh, if this happens, it's impossible for me to not hit and do maximum damage every time.
Yeah.
Or, this weird combination of rules that never came up during playtesting that someone figured out. You find something like actually broken, you have to address that somehow. But if you're just talking about someone who is using the rules to make the best character that they can, that's not necessarily a bad person that you have the right to, like, I'm going to change the rules on you because I don't like the fact that you're doing this thing that you're doing.
Yeah, you're winning my game. Yeah.
Right. And so, in that situation, like I said, I don't know if there's a hero in that story.
If you, for whatever reason, need to change a rule on the fly, that rule is permanently changed. You can't just capriciously decide that that's going to be just for that moment. This rule has changed. That's like, all right, that's now canon for the rest of this game.
And the problem with doing that is then you may find out later that this rules change that you made now affects something else that you guys didn't anticipate.
That brings me back to where I am. But it's like, if you are just as a GM capriciously changing rules to fit the situation, and then they revert back to where they were before, that's a dick move. Now you're just being a vindictive GM, and you are doing shit to fuck with your players.
Right. Or one specific player. And it's like it's like they're having this fight between them, and where are the rest of the other players during this? And how much enjoyment are they having?
Oh, they're at it again. Right. I'm going to go get a beer while you guys sort this out.
So anyway, his other two questions does it need to be discussed? Yes.
Yes.
And surely GM has the final say? No. GM does not have the final say.
No.
It has to. If you're going to change the rules of the game that you all have agreed to play, everyone has to buy into it. Everybody has to buy into it.
And also, here's another thing that bothers me, because it happened in a couple of our games. If you are that guy, the rules lawyer, min-maxer, grognard, and you have a rule exploit that you discover, don't stop the game to discuss it with your GM in front of everybody else, because that'll go on for 20, 30 minutes. And, the GM's... take it away from the table. You and the GM can discuss it, and maybe that rule can get implemented later. But don't stop the game, because that bothers me the most. I'm like, why are you arguing with me for 20 minutes right now? Everyone else is sitting here. You couldn't have picked this out now, or can we discuss it? You are taking away everybody else's fun so that you can be the center of attention to point out a syntax error that you want to exploit. F you.
Right.
Right? And I think as a GM, you need to say, I hear what you're saying. Let's finish this session and we can talk about it later. For now, the rules are going to, as they stand. I understand that this combat might be awkward for you at that point. We will work it out. But we're not going to spend 45 minutes discussing a syntax error in front of everybody else right now while we're doing this game. After this, maybe, and then we'll bring it to then you bring it to the table and say, he pointed out this syntax error that can be interpreted this way. Do you guys all agree that it's that way or this way? All right? If that's this way, this is the way we're going to interpret it from now on.
All right.
Done. Yeah. I've been in that game.
Oh, yeah,
where
so
somebody's going through the rule book,
so
and they say, oh, you did this wrong at this point because of this period in this sentence. And you're like, oh, God,
and the problem
shut up.
A lot of the people who do that, they do wrong stuff as well.
Mm-hmm. I think we might be talking about the same person. You've seen the guy that every time a GM makes a decision, they grab the rule book and they start looking. Either for an exploit or just to double check to make sure they're doing it right.
Right.
And oh, my God, it takes away from everybody else's fun.
Yes, it does. All right. Thank you again, Nicholas.
Yeah. Brings up some good talking points.
But yeah, in that situation, I don't think I'm not on either of their sides. I think they're both not being good.
I like to think of a rule system as it's a game engine, right? It's just like it's just like a video game. They make an engine, and your little RPG system is an engine. And if you don't know anything about cars, you're not going to open up the hood and start pulling out hoses and things just because they look ugly. You don't know what they do.
Right.
And, you're like, well, this thing's really noisy, so I pulled it out. Well, dude, that was your alternator. Your car isn't really going to go very far without it. Oh, that's all the cooling system. Now you get about 40 feet and it blows up.
All these hoses.
Well, why'd you take them out? Well, they looked ugly. My wife didn't like them, so I took them out.
Right.
One of my passengers was complaining really loudly about how the hoses were hissing, so I took them out. You can't start pulling shit out of your car without knowing what they do, really knowing what they do, Well, every time I stepped on this pedal, it squeaked, so I went down there and I took them all off, and now it doesn't squeak. Well, now your car doesn't stop, because it was your brakes. Sheesh. Anyway, that's kind of how I look at a game system. Is people that are smarter than I and have spent more time with it have hopefully worked out all of the kinks.
Right.
And we as nerds tend to think, well, I'm smarter than the game designer. I design games. I'm gonna fix this rule because clearly it's broken. Sometimes that's true, but I like to think that for the most part, those rules have been worked out for a reason.
That's sometimes true.
I know.
All right. World building.
World building.
We're very slowly building a world by building people and places and things and concepts in it. It's a fantasy world. And Stork has a new thing?
I do. It's kind of based on, a series of books and things. It occurred to me that in your magical fantasy world, there are a lot of people that maybe have low-level magic. That isn't enough to like go to a wizard school, or isn't enough to want to go adventuring, or there might be people that have a high acuity for magic, but they don't want to go adventuring. They're married. They've spent their time in the city for whatever reason. Not everybody wants to be a gypsy. I mean, if you think about an adventure, it's kind of like being, a truck driver or something. It's like you got to leave town, or you got to leave your home, you got to leave your family a lot.
We don't use the term gypsy anymore.
Sorry. Anyway,
a mendicant.
My point is that I thought it would be really interesting to have maybe just sort of people that have low-level magic that isn't that useful to become healers, and they set up a healer house. So you might have people that working there that have cure light wounds, or even cure light wounds at half efficacy, and they can also couple it with some alchemy. They make mustard packs, and they can know how to splint,
or maybe
things
actual low tech medicine
as
well.
Just really
right.
low tech medicine stuff. So if your character gets hurt or whatever, it'd be the equivalent of a hospital or a clinic that's in every town. And maybe it's run by an ex-adventurer who can resurrect and restore. But for the most part, if you're living in a fantasy magical world, magic is kind of everywhere. It's kind of what everybody uses all the time.
You know what you've made?
What have I made?
A medieval urgent care center.
Yes, I have. And you can structure it any way you want. I mean, this could be a starting place for your little low-level healer character. I'm basically taking the religion out of it, because clerics are...
Right, sure.
You're only getting it from your god, but I'm trying to keep it so that, And if your adventuring party comes into town with broken or disease, instead of waiting for the temple to open or tracking someone else down, there's like a clinic or a hospital that's full of healers that can deal with it for you. So I wanted to set that up as maybe, and it could be even in small towns and villages, there might be like a little clinic set up that has somebody that can just sort of cure wounds or whatever, and they help the farmers. Because again, I mean, living in medieval and Renaissance times, people got stepped on by cattle and carts rolled over on them, or they fell into a ditch and broke their ribs.
Right.
And so everybody needed healing to some extent. So healers would be very, very busy. And everybody's magic is everywhere. Nobody thinks like, oh my God, your magic? It's like, oh, another one.
Right.
But there might be various levels of intensity that people have it. Some people may not be magical enough to actually continue on to become a wizard.
In GURPS, you buy levels of majoring.
Yes, you do.
It used to be like 3 was the max you could buy.
Yeah.
And that meant you're a full-blown mage. You can cast pretty much any spell you can learn.
Yes.
And if you have majoring 1, there's some stuff you may not be able to do. Yeah.
Or even in tweaking the rules a bit, maybe you have just enough magic to cast Cure Light Wounds at half effectiveness.
Right.
So you would roll the Cure Light Wounds and then have it. And so it's somebody there that has just enough magical power to cast the spell, and that's like kind of the only spell they know. Maybe a lay on hands, but it's not very good. And so they couple it with bandages and splints. So instead of, if you break your leg, they splint you up, cast Cure Light Wounds at half effectiveness, you wear the splint for a week, as opposed to 6 months. Something like that. So yes, it would be a non-denominational hospital clinic for healing.
Excellent.
And again, you could be a center point of the adventure. People keep coming in poisoned. It could be a place that your character is started in as a young child. They had healing abilities, and they decided I'm tired of being a healer and move on. It could be a place that perhaps you're assigned to by the city state. They gather together people and they spread them out, and it could be a center point for all kinds of starting adventures or of adventures, as well as you come into town all beat up. Everybody goes to the healing house, gets cure light wounds and gets cure disease, and goes on their way.
Right. Okay. Medieval urgent care. All right, I'm not going to do the religion this time, because I realize I'm stealing all of the prep that I am going to be using in the GURPS game. Then I don't want to put it in because I've already talked about it.
Right.
So I'm not doing. So the religion, I'm not doing that right now.
Oops.
Okay. This was the Field of Titans, and this is a large area where there, as far as anyone can tell, there's no civilization here. It's like Could be a big open valley someplace. It could be out in the steppes. It could be pretty much anywhere. But it's a big open area that's where there's basically nothing, right? Just a little bit of nature scattered around, except for the fact that there are the tops of enormous stone heads. Sort of like Easter Island. You know, Easter Island, the things are partially buried, and they dig through and like, oh, look, there's like a little dude.
But they're all lined up. These are
like randomly placed
at various levels
in this, and like going by the size of the heads. If these are in fact full-bodied statues, they're at least 100 meters tall, which is a little over 300 feet in American. So, but and people have gone out in this area and like, well, if there's these giant statues, there must have been a civilization that built them.
Right?
They're under here somewhere. So there are people, sort of like a fantasy version of archaeologists, who go out there and it's like, how deep does the statue go? And we'll go out and try to excavate around them and get a bunch of people. It's extremely expensive, though, to hire a bunch of people to go out and like dig around a statue, and there may not be any payoff. So like people out of curiosity will come out and do it for a while and like, well, yeah, we were able to get to like mid-shoulder, or maybe able to get to like, where the abs start or whatever, but no one's ever been able to get...
But are there full-form bodies underneath them?
It seems like there are. There's a few of them that have been dug down, and they never hit like, oh no, they stopped digging, or they stopped chiseling.
Is the land? I don't know if you're typing this in. Is the land like volcanic glass or something, and it's just really hard to get through?
No, but it's like this medieval. It's a medieval era, so it's like it just takes a long time, and you got to pay people if you want them to come out and dig on this thing, and some of them might do it, and but if there's no payoff for it to be able to continue.
Than the fact that you excavated
it's just curiosity.
1,000 or 100-foot tall golem.
Who knows?
Right.
They could just be statues of gods of some fallen civilization. No one really knows what they are. There's a bunch of them. There's probably a dozen or dozen and a half of them, all scattered about in an area. It might have been a vast city. If you dig down far enough, you might find that city. Who knows? But it's a bunch of heads.
There might even be heads scattered throughout the land that isn't discovered yet. Like the Olmec civilizations. You like go through a forest or something, you find a head just sitting there, and you're like,
what the fuck is this thing?
And you start looking around, you realize that maybe there was a city here. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's mine. So there you go. And that's it.
Yeah.
We'll call it this one? Yeah. Look at that. Thank you for joining us for Season 28, Episode 17 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
I'm Stork.
And we'll see you next week at 10 a.m.
Like, don't make me get up that early.
I've been up since 4. HappyJacks.org/live, Saturday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll see you the next time. Stay safe.
Australia and maybe East Timor, Beatrice all exalted, girls or dungeons and dragons, hero pathfinder, fate or savage wilds, evil plots will be usurping, though we could do with less burping. Happy Jack's podcast will be douchebags all.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.
Bum 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 bum.